The first time I met him, I almost laughed in his face. Not because he was an impressive god, he was, but because life had this cruel sense of irony. There he was, my so-called art advisor, a man brought in by the gallery board to refine my perspective. And there I was, the prodigal artist, pretending I wasn't already bleeding inside. He walked in with that calm, measured composure that only people who carried quiet storms inside themselves seemed to have. His presence filled the room before he said a single word. His name was Elijah Cole, and he looked like someone who didn't belong in the mess of my life. Too polished, too untouchable, like marble that should never be handled by stained hands like mine. But the moment his eyes found me, something cracked. "Mr. Hale," he said, his voice low, smooth, like a cello string plucked in a silent hall. "I've admired your work for years." I scoffed, because what else was I supposed to do? Admiration meant nothing when my canvases were smeared with both paint and grief. "You mean the board sent you to babysit me?" I shot back, half daring him to flinch. He didn't. Instead, he smiled, just faintly, the kind of smile that told me he was already reading between the lines of my anger. That was the hook. That was where it started. And God help me, that was where it all began to fall apart. The gallery smelled of turpentine and old wood, a strange comfort I hadn't felt in weeks. After my father's death, I hadn't been able to lift a brush without shaking. Art was supposed to save me, but all it did was remind me of the man who'd both pushed me and broken me in equal measure. Elijah didn't push. He didn't demand. He just watched, observed. His gaze wasn't invasive, it was patient, like he knew I needed silence more than speeches. That infuriated me because patience felt like pity. "Why are you even here?" I asked him one late afternoon, when the golden light bled through the high windows and turned the dust into glitter. I had a half-finished sketch of a faceless figure in front of me, charcoal staining my hands. He was standing behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence, yet careful not to touch. "Because," he said simply, "sometimes an artist doesn't need answers. He needs someone to stand in the quiet with him until he finds them himself." Damn him. Damn him for saying things like that, for sounding like he understood me when no one else did. The days turned into weeks. He never tried to change me. He never forced my hand. Instead, Elijah would lean against the studio wall, reading old books with pages yellowed by time, while I wrestled with canvases that refused to speak. Sometimes he'd offer small observations, not criticisms, not corrections, but fragments of thought. "Your colors," he murmured one night, pointing to a wild splash of crimson across the canvas. "They feel like rage trying to be love." I froze because how could he know? How could he see what I hadn't even admitted to myself? And that's when it happened, the first betrayal of my carefully built walls. I looked at him, really looked, and realized he wasn't just the board's advisor. He wasn't just another stranger sent to fix me. He was a mirror, reflecting parts of me I had buried too deep. Of course, the world didn't make it easy. The whispers started almost immediately. The artist and his advisor. Too close. Unprofessional. In America, in our city, progress was always conditional, celebrated in theory, punished in reality. My brother confronted me first. "Are you seriously risking everything? After what Dad worked for? After what this family name stands for?" I hated him for bringing father into it. I hated myself more for caring. Elijah heard the argument, though I never told him about it. Later that night, he found me outside, chain-smoking under the cold sting of November air. He didn't say anything at first, just stood next to me, his shoulder brushing mine, light, careful, but enough to steady the tremor in my chest. "You don't have to fight this alone," he whispered. I turned to him, my throat burning. "Do you have any idea what it costs to be us? To let this happen?" His eyes held mine, unwavering. "Do you have any idea what it costs to bury something real just because the world says you should?" And just like that, the ground beneath me shifted. The intimacy crept in slowly, dangerously, like paint seeping into canvas fibers until you couldn't tell where one color ended and another began. A lingering glance here, a hand brushing against mine there, the electric silence stretching between us longer each night. It wasn't the kind of love story people wanted us to have. It wasn't loud or easy. It was fragile, forbidden, filled with sharp edges that cut as much as they healed. But when he finally touched Miralai touched might wasn't fireworks. It wasn't chaos. It was a quiet unraveling, the kind that makes you realize how lonely you've been just by feeling what it's like not to be. And maybe that's why I was terrified. Because tenderness, real tenderness, was so much harder to survive than pain. The morning after that night, I woke with a strange tightness in my chest. Not the usual grief. Not the numbing emptiness I had come to know so well since my father's death. Something else. Something dangerous. I went to the studio before sunrise, hoping the cold air and silence would tame the storm inside me. But he was already there. Elijah stood by the tall window, his profile outlined by the gray dawn. He held a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, as if he belonged there, as if the space had always been his. "You're early?" I muttered, tossing my bag down. "So are you," he replied, and then he smiled in that maddeningly gentle way of his, as though he knew the war I was waging with myself but wouldn't call me out on it. I hated that smile. I needed it more than air. The days blurred, each one dragging me deeper into a gravity I couldn't escape. Our conversations grew longer, stretching past midnight when the gallery lights hummed and the city outside slept. He never pried, but he listened. God, he listened in a way no one else ever had. "You always hide your subjects' faces," he observed one night as I worked on another faceless sketch. His voice was low, not accusing, just curious. I didn't answer at first. The truth was too heavy, too raw. Finally, I said, "Faces demand honesty. Eyes don't let you lie. And you're afraid of being seen?" I froze, my charcoal still hovering above the page. When I looked up, his gaze was steady, unflinching. I wanted to laugh, to throw a sarcastic remark his way, but nothing came. Instead, the silence between us deepened, heavy, intimate. It was unbearable. It was everything. The rumors didn't stop. They only grew louder. At first, whispers in the gallery hallways. Then subtle remarks at board meetings. Then outright warnings. One afternoon, after a particularly heated session where a patron had implied Elijah was a distraction, I stormed out, ready to slam the door on the world. Elijah followed, of course. "They're vultures," I snapped, pacing the empty corridor. "They want my art but not me. They want my name, my family's legacy. But they want to strip me of the only thing that makes me human." He let me rant. He always did. When I finally stopped, breathless and shaking, he stepped closer. "You don't need their approval," he said quietly. "That's easy for you to say." I shot back. "You're not the one carrying my father's shadow. You're not the one expected to be someone you're not." He interrupted, his tone sharp now, cutting through my self-pity. "Do you think you're the only one who knows what it's like to hide?" The words hung in the air, charged, almost too revealing. For the first time, I wondered what Elijah carried behind that calm exterior. What battles had carved that restraint into him? Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. Then, before I could ask, he turned away. That night, I dreamed of him. Not in the explicit, fevered way you'd expect, but in small, piercing moments. His hand brushing mine. The warmth of his shoulder when he stood too close. The way his voice wrapped around my name. I woke up sweating, guilty, terrified. It was inevitable, I suppose. The pull between us. The night it finally broke. The city was drowning in rain. The gallery had closed hours ago, but we stayed behind, pretending to work. Lightning flashed, thunder shook the windows, but inside the studio it was only us. The storm outside a reflection of the storm between us. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant the painting, the grief, or him. Elijah set his book down and crossed the room. Slowly, deliberately, my pulse roared in my ears. "You don't have to," he said, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. "Not alone." And then his hand was on mine finally, undeniably, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. I should have pulled away. I didn't. Instead, I turned to him, and the look in his eyes shattered what little defenses I had left. Hunger, restraint, fear, longing, all of it, tangled and raw. "Tell me to stop," he breathed. But I couldn't, so I kissed him. Or maybe he kissed me. It didn't matter. What mattered was the fire and the quiet all at once. The way my body knew his like it had been waiting all along. The days after were both heaven and hell. Heaven because I had tasted something real. Hell because the world outside would never allow it. We were careful, secret. The stolen glances in crowded rooms, the brushes of hands when no one was watching, the nights when we locked the studio door and forgot the rest of the world existed. But secrets weigh heavy. And love, no matter how careful, has a way of spilling into the open. It was my brother again who confronted me first. "I saw you," he said, his voice low, almost dangerous. My blood ran cold. "Saw what?" "Don't play games with me, Daniel," he snapped. "You and that advisor. Do you have any idea what this will do to us? To the gallery? To everything Dad built?" Something inside me broke then. The fear, the shame, the endless cycle of expectations. I was done. "Maybe I don't care what Dad built," I said, my voice shaking. "Maybe I'm tired of building prisons in his name." His face twisted, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're going to throw away everything for him?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. But the fallout was only beginning. One by one, doors started closing. Patrons withdrew. The board questioned Elijah's position. The gossip turned venomous. Immoral. Unprofessional. A scandal. Elijah tried to shield me from it, but I saw the toll it took on him. The way his shoulders tensed when someone made a cutting remark. The way his smile grew thinner, more forced. One night, after another brutal day, I found him sitting alone in the studio, staring at an unfinished canvas. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight. "Elijah," I whispered, stepping closer. He didn't look at me. "Maybe they're right," he said, his voice hollow. My heart cracked. "Don't you dare," I hissed, kneeling in front of him, forcing him to meet my gaze. "Don't you dare let them make you doubt what we have." His eyes were wet, though he didn't let the tears fall. "Do you understand what this could cost you? Your career, your family, everything you've fought for." I cupped his face, my thumb brushing against his cheek. "None of that matters if I lose you." The silence after that was unbearable. But then he leaned forward, pressing his forehead against mine, and I knew, whatever storm was coming, we would face it together. The storm, of course, arrived faster than we expected. The storm came not with thunder this time, but with silence, cold, suffocating silence. 2 weeks after my brother's confrontation, the board held a meeting. They didn't even invite me. I only knew because Elijah walked out of that room pale, jaw clenched, his hands trembling ever so slightly as if he had held on to his composure with every ounce of strength. "What happened?" I demanded, catching him in the corridor. He wouldn't look at me. "They asked me to resign." The words landed like a knife in my gut. "What? Not hey can't. They can." And they did. I wanted to scream, to smash every framed canvas lining the walls, to set the whole goddamn gallery on fire. Instead, I grabbed his arm. "You can't just let them, Daniel." His voice cracked on my name. "If I fight this, they'll turn it against you. They'll say you're compromised, incapable of separating your art from," he faltered, finally meeting my gaze, eyes burning. "From me." My throat closed. He was willing to throw himself into the fire just to protect me. And that terrified me more than losing the gallery. That night we met in the studio again, but the air was different. Heavy, fragile. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, his head tilted back, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I slid down beside him, our shoulders brushing. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't comfortable this time. It was thick with everything we couldn't say. Finally, I whispered, "Tell me the truth. If you walk away now, will you regret it?" His eyes opened slowly. "Regret? No." He paused, then added, voice low and breaking, But I'll bleed for it. My chest tightened. Then don't. Don't walk away. We'll face them, Elijah. Together. He shook his head. You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what people are capable of when they feel threatened. I grabbed his hand, threading my fingers through his. I don't care. I'm already drowning without you. For the first time that night, he smiled small, sad, but real. And then he kissed me like it was both a promise and a goodbye. The rumors became headlines. A local art magazine picked up the whispers, turning them into sharp words in print. The Hale legacy in jeopardy? Artists' private affairs risk public collapse. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, patrons, strangers, half of them curious, half of them cruel. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering, their voices dripping with judgment. It's disgusting, really? His poor father would roll in his grave. I nearly dropped the basket in my hands. My brother cornered me again, this time angrier than ever. Do you realize what you've done? Sponsors are pulling out. We're losing investors left and right. Good, I snapped. If their money depends on me living a lie, then I don't want it. His face turned red, veins bulging in his neck. This isn't just about you. It's about all of us. Mom, me, the family name. Stop hiding behind Dad's ghost. I shouted. Stop pretending his expectations are worth more than my life. For a moment, his fury cracked into something else, hurt, fear, maybe even love twisted in its own way. But he said nothing more, just stormed out, leaving me trembling. Elijah tried to keep his distance after that. He told me it was for my sake, that the scandal would die faster if people didn't see us together. But every time he avoided my eyes in public, every time he walked past me in the gallery without a word, it felt like I was being gutted. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed to his apartment, small, neat, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, and pounded on the door until he opened it. Daniel, he said, startled. His hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. I shoved past him. You don't get to disappear on me. Not now. He sighed, closing the door behind us. I'm trying to protect you. By breaking me apart? My voice shook. Because that's what you're doing. Every day you pretend we're nothing. You carve me open a little more. His composure cracked. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me gently but firmly. You think this is easy for me? You think I don't want to hold your hand in broad daylight, kiss you without fear? But I can't watch them destroy you because of me. They already are. I cried. My chest heaved, my eyes burning. So let them. Let them burn it all down if it means we don't have to keep pretending. His hands slid from my shoulders to my face, cupping me as if I were something fragile and precious. You're going to ruin me, he whispered, voice breaking. Then be ruined with me, I whispered back. And this time, when we kissed, it wasn't desperation. It was defiance. But love doesn't erase the world outside. The gallery board moved quickly, cutting Elijah's ties officially. He packed up his desk in silence while I stood helplessly, fury clawing at my throat. When he walked out, box in hand, the entire staff's eyes followed him like he was a criminal. I wanted to scream, to tell them he was the only one who had ever made me feel alive, but the words died on my tongue. That night, I painted for the first time in months. Not the faceless figures I always hid behind, no. This time it was Elijah. His eyes, his hands, the curve of his mouth when he tried not to smile. Every stroke felt like a confession. Every color a piece of my heart splattered on canvas. When it was done, I stood back, trembling. I had painted him like he belonged to the light, even though the world wanted to bury him in shadow. And I knew then, no matter what they took from me, they couldn't take this. The exhibition was already scheduled for December. The board wanted to cancel it, of course, but the contracts were signed, the publicity too far along. They thought the scandal would make me cave, make me hide. Instead, I made a decision that would either save me or destroy me. I would unveil the painting, his painting. When the night of the exhibition arrived, the gallery buzzed with tension. Journalists hovered like vultures, cameras flashing, patrons whispering. My brother avoided my gaze, his jaw locked tight. I stood before the covered canvas, palms sweaty, heart racing. Elijah wasn't there, or at least, I didn't think he was. I had begged him to come, but he had only shaken his head. Too dangerous, he'd said. But I had to do this anyway. I pulled the cloth away. Gasps filled the room. There he was, Elijah, captured in strokes of fire and tenderness, defiance and grace. Not hidden, not faceless, but whole. Real. This, I said, my voice carrying despite the trembling, is the truth. My art has always been about honesty. Tonight, I give you mine. The silence was deafening. Cameras clicked. Someone muttered, "Scandalous." Another voice said, "Brave." And then, in the back of the room, I saw him, Elijah, standing there, eyes wide, frozen, as if he couldn't believe what I'd done. Our gazes locked across the sea of people. And for the first time, I didn't look away. That was the moment everything changed. The gallery erupted that night, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. Some stormed out, their heels striking the marble floor in sharp protest. Others lingered, whispering furiously, their faces caught between outrage and fascination. But there were also those who stepped closer, eyes softened, voices hushed with awe. For a moment, I didn't care which side they were on. All I saw was Elijah, his figure still, his chest rising and falling as though the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths had finally crashed onto him. When the crowd began to press in, reporters shouting questions, my brother glaring daggers, I moved toward him. Every step felt like walking through fire. By the time I reached him, the noise had dulled into a hum, a blur that couldn't touch the silence we carried between us. "Elijah," I whispered, my throat tight. His eyes were wet, though he tried to blink it away. "You shouldn't have done that." "Yes," I said, standing taller, louder this time so even the vultures around us could hear. "I should, because you are the only thing I've painted that feels like truth." The cameras flashed, the whispers swelled, but I didn't care. For once, I wasn't afraid. The fallout was immediate. Sponsors withdrew. Contracts vanished. My brother didn't speak to me for weeks, his silence colder than his anger had ever been. The gallery cut ties with me, too, claiming irreconcilable differences. It should have felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't, because Elijah stayed. We built something new, away from the suffocating weight of the Hale legacy. A small studio downtown, nothing glamorous, exposed brick, creaky floors, light that spilled through cracked windows in golden waves each morning. We painted side by side. Sometimes we argued, sometimes we laughed until the neighbors complained, but it was ours. People still whispered, of course. Some came to the studio just to gawk, to see if the scandalous artist and his disgraced advisor were still playing house. But others came because they believed, because the honesty of my work resonated in ways the polished gallery walls never allowed. Slowly, painfully, a new kind of recognition began to grow. Not fame built on my father's shadow, but respect built on my own truth. The hardest part, though, wasn't the world outside. It was healing what lay between me and the family I thought I'd lost. One cold evening in January, my brother showed up at the studio. He stood awkwardly in the doorway watching me work. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I still don't understand you. I don't know if I ever will." I put my brush down. "You don't have to. You just have to accept that this," I gestured at the canvas, at Elijah sitting in the corner with his book, pretending not to listen, "is who I am." My brother's jaw clenched, but then he nodded once, stiff and reluctant. "Dad would have hated it," he muttered. "Maybe," I said softly, "but maybe he was wrong." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Spring came, and with it, our first independent exhibition. We rented a modest hall, invited everyone who had ever believed in us, and braced ourselves for rejection. But when the doors opened, the room filled students, young artists, strangers who had read about us and wanted to see for themselves. Elijah hovered at my side, nervous in a way I had never seen him before. I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers without hesitation. For once, no one gasped. No one turned away. Instead, they leaned closer to the paintings. They asked questions. They listened. And when the night ended, Elijah pulled me into a quiet corner, his eyes glowing with something fierce and fragile all at once. "You did it," he murmured. "No," I corrected, pressing my forehead against his. "We did. Our love wasn't perfect. It was scarred, stitched together from battles we shouldn't have had to fight. There were still days when the world outside felt heavy, when the whispers stung, when old wounds reopened. But every time I looked at him, his smile, his patience, the way he believed in me even when I didn't, I knew it was worth it. Because tenderness, I had learned, was the bravest thing of all. One evening, months later, we stood on the rooftop of our building. The city spread out in twinkling lights below us. The air smelled of rain, the sky bruised with the last colors of sunset. Elijah slipped his arm around me, pulling me close. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd end up here," he said softly, "I would have laughed." I smiled, leaning into him. "If someone had told me I'd survive this long enough to be happy, I would have laughed harder." He kissed my temple, his lips warm against my skin. "Do you think it ever gets easier?" "No," I admitted, "but I think it gets better." We stood there in silence, the weight of the world far below us, the warmth of each other the only thing that mattered. And for the first time in years, I felt free. They said he was just my art advisor. They said it would ruin me. Maybe they were right. Maybe it did. But in the ruin, I found something greater. I found love. I found truth. And I found myself. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.